Jeff, for those that maybe didn't get to see it, can you tell us a little bit more about Drew Robinson?
Yeah, Drew Robinson was with the Texas Rangers for a couple of years, moved to the San Francisco Giants, sort of a guy who was always going to be fringy between a AAA and a big league player, and ends up with the Giants last year. What he'd been carrying through his whole career, really his whole life, were feelings of worthlessness, of depression, of sadness, of I'm not good enough, of I have nobody to talk to. All of these things going untreated for as long as they did, Pat, culminated in him being sent home along with all the other baseball players on March 12th when the pandemic shut down the country and shut down sports. And for the next month, Drew was just sitting there alone in his thoughts, alone in some of the same thoughts that people have who are listening to this show, or friends of people listening to the show, or family of people listening to the show. And Drew decided that he was going to take his own life. And he held a gun to his head. He pulled the trigger. And then he opened up his eyes and realized he was still alive.
Man.
And for the next 20 hours, Pat, as the story tells and as the documentary that's on ESPN Plus now shows, Drew Robinson was deciding whether he wanted to live. And he had a hole in his head. It was about this big.
Jeez.
And he was bleeding. And it was a graphic, scary, awful scene. But he made it to the point where at that 20th hour, he was sitting there on the couch where he had shot himself initially. And in one hand, he had a gun.
Jeez.
And in the other hand, he had his phone dialed to 911. And he had to ask himself the question, which do I choose? And he chose life. And this is the story of what has happened since Drew Robinson chose life.
Man, I am pumped for Drew Robinson making that decision in the 20th hour. I mean, that is something that I wish upon no human, but it seems like it does happen too regularly than it should be. And I do believe this story is something where people can say, like, you know, I'm not the only one. That seems to be a lot of the thoughts, and I don't know every thought about it, but no, that there's
Let me, if I may do this, I know this is your show, but one of the reasons I wanted to come on with you specifically is because Drew's whole purpose here is not just to get people talking to one another and to family members, but really to destigmatize the idea that mental health in sports is something that we shouldn't be talking about. And you, Pat, were an athlete. You are an athlete. You go out there, whether it's in the wrestling ring, whether it's on the football field, you go out there all the time. And no matter how high you're feeling, no matter how good things are, there have to be moments where it doesn't feel right for you. And where you do talk with people who are, whether it's, inside the locker room, whether it's in a clubhouse, wherever it is, where people hold things inside and hide feelings. And I imagine you have seen that throughout your career as an athlete too.
Well, funny you say that, actually. And I've talked about this one time on air, and I've always referenced the 13-9 game, which is West Virginia Pitt. My junior year, we win. We go to the national championship. We know it. The night before the game, we knew it was going to happen. Pitt, big rival. First quarter, I missed 2 kicks. We had to lead at halftime, but we inevitably go on to lose that game. I got death threats, right? This was back in the day when people actually used to write those things, you know, like people were going out of their way to let me know. And there were some dark, dark days there where I even thought, like, I've just made everybody mad. I let down all my friends. I let down all my family. My name is being talked about everywhere, and it's not being a good thing. I'm a failure. And I thought about potentially ending it, right? Like, I actually drove like hours into, I just went on a drive in Jeep Lightning, hours into like the woods. I thought about just disappearing, like literally just never being seen again. So I understand that it happens. And I think I didn't talk to anybody. My teammates helped me through that whole thing, obviously. My mom, I told my mom about it. But aside from that, nobody really even knew I had those thoughts. And your teammates build you back up. Your community, your network is supposed to lift you back up. And for a lot of this, whether it's your school, your classroom, your friends, for a lot of this whole quarantine, people have literally been isolated, right?
Yep.
And then when you're isolated, and I'm no fucking doctor, I think that is very evident. I mean, that is very evident. But I do believe the community aspect of humans is something that is needed for everybody. And for some people, it's a much larger hit and effect than others. And it's like, yo, this story with Drew Robinson is a good one because this, I mean, if you watch any documentaries, this is becoming something that's becoming pretty prevalent in our society.
Yeah, I mean, the CDC took a survey of people from 18 to 24, came out in August and said 25% have had suicidal thoughts within the last couple of months. That's a really scary number. I want to go back a second, though. You say I'm not a doctor. You may not have a medical degree, Pat, but the fact is, to me, the most influential people in our world right now are the ones who do provide that community. And that's the beauty of this show, that you have a community of people who gravitate toward you and who listen to you and who love you and everyone else sitting in that room right now for who they are and who can all talk to one another. And that's the message that Drew's trying to send here. He had people around him the entire time. He had his mom, he had his dad, his brother, his sister, this woman, Diana, who he loved. He had his teammates, he had his friends, he had mentors, he had coaches. He just didn't think he could have these types of conversations with him because he was not willing to make himself vulnerable. But here you are talking about your darkest moment to an audience of thousands, millions of people who are hearing you say this right now. If Drew Robinson can do it, if Pat McAfee can do it, you can do it too.
That's awesome, Jet, and I appreciate the opportunity to add into the incredible, inspiring story that you got to tell of Drew Robinson, which everybody can see on ESPN+. What's next for him? You said he's coming back to baseball, so he lost an eye in this whole thing, right? So incredible. What is his mindset? How's that whole thing going to work out? That seems like a tough sport to have one eye, but I would assume a guy who's been here and gotten out of it is somebody who's mentally tough enough to go on and get after it, I'd assume, right?
Yeah, let me say this about mental toughness, though. We're not going to pretend like Drew Robinson is healed all of a sudden, just like with anything else. You know, as he says, just because I'm feeling good today doesn't mean that tomorrow is going to be a good day. Every single day is a fight for him, and he's allowed to have bad days. He's allowed to have days where he just doesn't feel like things are going well. And what he's learned to do is really just embrace those days and understand that if something's going wrong, you can always take something else out of it. He's like, if I show up late to something, I used to be where I would kick myself for being late. Now I can tell myself I'm learning that I need to start a little bit earlier. And everything with Drew right now is a learning process, including figuring out how to play baseball again without his right eye. Now, he is a left-handed hitter. So you can imagine if he's like this, that's the lead eye right there that he's going to be using. I mean, imagine, Pat, do me a favor, close your right eye, and I don't know if someone's got a ball in there, but throw it at him.
Am I bunting or am I hitting bombs here?
Well, we don't want to wreck the studio too much. We know what you can do with the bat. There we go.
Hey, I can bunch.
Eye contact.
Now, I did see you. And by the way, we just found out I think I am a lefty. Wow. We just found that out, not 100% sure. But it
is different with one eye.
Well, I saw you post a video, though. He's hitting bombs. Like, this is going to be, and I assume you're going to continue to keep in contact with him. And shout out to Drew, by the way, for sharing his story. Like, that's really cool. I'm excited to see how this entire book goes because this has a chance to be legendary. You know what I mean? Yeah. And also, I think, incredibly inspiring.
Here's the thing. We're 24 or so hours out from the story and the movie debuting. In my mind, it already is legendary.
Well, true.
I can't tell you the number of people who I've heard from and who say that they have been inspired by what Drew has done. And if it's one day, imagine what he's going to get to do with the rest of his life. I'm just excited for him that this purpose that he saw all those months ago when we started talking is finally coming to fruition, and he's finally getting a chance to do. You know, he was laying in the hospital, Pat, the night that he went there on April 17th. And his older brother, Chad, who was a baseball player and someone he looked up to forever, called him. And Drew doesn't remember this, but Chad remembers it clearly. he was asking Drew questions. What happened? Why did you do this? Are you okay? And all Drew could say to him was, I'm meant to be alive. I'm meant to be alive. I'm meant to be alive.
Oh, that's awesome.
And you know what? Right now is why he's meant to be alive.
Yeah. Hey, definitely legendary. Incredibly inspiring. If Drew comes back and starts hitting bombs on everybody, I mean, that would, no, I understand that this has been amazing. This is an incredible story, inspiring a lot of people. He comes back, hits bombs, or has any success at all.
Yeah,
any success at all. I mean, unbelievable. Can't wait to continue to follow his story, and we can't thank you enough for presenting it. Ladies and gentlemen, from ESPN, award-winning journalist, I'd assume. Have you won awards? I've seen you won.
A couple.
Hey.
Which ones? Any ones that like good ones?
Nothing you give a shit about.
Okay. All right.